Amara Blake walked into Dock 27, wanting nothing more than a quiet drink in a town where nobody knew her name, but Cole Harrigan, a decorated Navy SEAL, with an ego to match, decided the composed black woman sitting alone would make perfect entertainment. It started with condescending questions, escalated into public mockery, and ended with a wager that he could pin her in 3 seconds flat. The entire bar watched as Cole reached for her shoulder, confident this tourist didn't stand a chance, but they had just provoked someone who'd been declared dead for 8 years, someone whose call sign still made trained operatives go pale. And tonight, when Amara whispered 2 words, everyone in Dock 27 was about to learn exactly why some ghosts should never be awakened. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Friday nights in coastal towns have a rhythm all their own. The storm had kept the fishing boats docked for nearly a week, and now that the weather had finally broken, everyone who worked the water needed a drink and some company. Dock 27 sat right on the edge of the harbor, a weathered building with salt-stained windows and a neon sign that flickered between blue and green. Inside, the air smelled like fried fish, beer, and decades of cigarette smoke that no amount of cleaning could ever fully erase. The owner, Rita Calloway, worked behind the bar with the easy confidence of someone who'd broken up more fights than she could count. She was in her 50s, gray streaking through her dark hair, with forearms that could bend a bottle cap without an opener. Her bartender, Luis Reyes, was younger, quick with a joke, and even quicker with the tap. Together, they kept the place running smooth, even when the crowd got rowdy. Tonight, the crowd was definitely rowdy. Amara Blake sat alone at the far end of the bar, nursing a ginger ale that had gone flat an hour ago. She didn't mind. The drink wasn't really the point. She wore dark jeans and a plain gray jacket, nothing that stood out, nothing that drew attention. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her posture was relaxed but ready. If you knew what to look for, you'd notice how her eyes swept the room every few minutes, cataloging exits, noting faces, watching hands. She looked like someone passing through, which was exactly what she wanted people to think. She was 32 years old, black, athletic without being showy about it, and she had the kind of stillness that made people forget she was there. That was a skill she'd worked hard to develop. The door banged open, and the noise level in Dock 27 jumped immediately. 4 men walked in, moving with the loose swagger of people who were used to being the toughest ones in any room. 3 of them were Navy sailors, still in their shore clothes, laughing about something that had happened on base. The 4th was different. He moved like he owned the floor beneath his feet. His name was Cole Harrigan, and if you spent 10 minutes in his presence, you'd know he was a Navy SEAL. Not because he wore it on his sleeve, but because he couldn't help letting it slip into every conversation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair, cut military short, and a grin that came easy. His right knuckle was bruised purple, probably from a training session that had gotten competitive. He slapped one of his buddies on the back hard enough to make the man stumble, then laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Rita's expression tightened just slightly. Luis glanced at her, and she gave him a small nod. They both knew the type. Operators like Harrigan usually drank hard, tipped well, and occasionally broke furniture. The key was to keep them happy without letting them get out of control. Cole and his crew grabbed a table near the dartboard, where a skinny kid in his early 20s was trying to improve his terrible aim. The kid's name was Danny, a dock worker who barely looked old enough to drink legally. He kept missing the board entirely, his darts thunking into the wooden wall with depressing regularity. Amara watched him for a moment, then stood and walked over. Her movements were quiet, economical. Danny didn't even notice her until she spoke. "Your stance is wrong," she said simply. Danny jumped, then laughed nervously. "Yeah, I'm not very good at this. It's not about being good. It's about breathing." She took the dart from his hand, adjusted his feet, and showed him how to exhale on the release. Don't think about the target. Just let your body do what it already knows how to do. Danny tried again. This time the dart hit the outer ring. Not perfect, but a hell of a lot better than before. "Whoa," he said, grinning. "Practice that," Amara said, and turned to walk back to her seat. That's when Cole noticed her. "Hey, hold on," he called out, his voice carrying across the bar. "Were you some kind of operator?" The room didn't go quiet. but a few heads turned. Amara paused, then looked at him with calm, dark eyes. "Just passing through," she said evenly. Cole stood up, beer in hand, grin widening. He had an audience now, and he played to it. "No, seriously. That was some tactical coaching right there. Stance, breathing, target acquisition." He mock saluted her, and his buddies chuckled. "You teach at some dojo or something?" "Or something," Amara replied, and started to walk away again. But Cole wasn't done. He stepped into her path, not quite blocking her, but close enough to make it a thing. "Come on, don't be shy. I'm just curious. You got that look, like you've seen some stuff." Rita leaned over to Luis and muttered, "Here we go." Amara stopped and looked at Cole for a long moment. He was drunk enough to be bold, sober enough to think he was in control. She'd met 100 men like him. Most of them learned eventually. Some didn't. "I've seen some stuff," she said quietly, "and I'd like to finish my drink in peace." Sure, no problem." Cole held up his hands in mock surrender, then turned to his table. "Hey guys, we've got a mystery woman here. Very serious, very tactical." He drew out the word like it was a joke, and his crew laughed on cue. One of them, a contractor with a shaved head and a scar running through his eyebrow, leaned back in his chair. "Maybe she's a Fed, or a spook," another suggested, and they all laughed again. Cole turned back to Amara, and now there was something sharper in his grin. "Tell you what," he said loudly, "I'll bet around for the whole bar that I can pin you in 3 seconds flat. Just a friendly little grapple. No harm, no foul." The room shifted. Some people cringed. Some leaned forward, curious. A few regulars shook their heads, knowing this wasn't going to end well. Amara reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded $20 bill, and laid it on the bar in front of Rita. "If I touch him," she said calmly, "he's going to apologize to you for the mess." Rita looked at the 20, then at Amara, then at Cole. "Honey, you don't have to prove anything." "I know," Amara said. Cole's grin stretched wider. "Sweetheart, I don't think you understand. I'm a Navy SEAL. I've trained with the best fighters in the world. No offense, but you don't know who I am." Amara's expression didn't change. "Then this should be easy for you." Cole handed his beer to one of his buddies and rolled his shoulders, playing it up. "All right, let's do this. 3 seconds. Ready." He reached for her shoulder. What happened next took less time than it takes to blink. Amara moved like water, smooth and inevitable. She caught his wrist, twisted it inward, and used his own momentum to pull him off balance. Her other hand pressed against his shoulder, and her hips aligned perfectly with his center of gravity. Before Cole even understood what was happening, he was face down on the bar, his arm locked behind him in a joint lock that sent bright, sharp pain shooting up to his shoulder. His beer, still sitting on the counter, tipped over and frothed across the wood, soaking a pile of coasters. The bar went silent. Amara leaned down, her voice low enough that only the people nearest could hear. "Call sign Viper 1. Cole's entire body went rigid. Not from the pain, from something else entirely. His eyes widened, and for the first time since he'd walked into Dock 27, he looked genuinely afraid. Luis, wiping a glass, swore under his breath. "No way." Amara released Cole's arm and stepped back, wiping beer foam from her sleeve. Cole stayed where he was for a moment, breathing hard, then slowly pushed himself upright. His face had gone pale. "Stand down," he said to his crew, his voice tight and strange. One of them, a quieter man named Ethan Pike with thoughtful eyes and a clean-shaven jaw, frowned. "Cole, what's wrong?" "Just stand down," Cole repeated. Amara turned to Rita and nodded. "Sorry about the mess." She picked up her 20 and left a second one beside it. For the coaster. Then she walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear the whispers starting. One of the contractors leaned over to Ethan and said Viper 1 was Kia. "That's what the reports said." "Or classified," someone else muttered. Amara pushed through the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The parking lot was gravel and puddles, lit by a single yellow streetlight that buzzed like an angry wasp. She scanned the lot automatically. 3 trucks, a sedan, a motorcycle, and, idling near the far edge with its lights off, a black SUV. Her jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text to a contact labeled Aunt May's. It wasn't really her aunt's number. It was a dead drop, a relay that would bounce through 3 encrypted servers before reaching the person who needed to see it. The message was simple. Burned. Name surfaced. Move the kid. She slipped the phone back in her pocket and walked toward her car, a nondescript gray sedan parked under a tree. As she opened the door, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. A man, lean and scarred, standing near the back of the parking lot. He was watching her. His name was Dane Rourke, though she didn't know that yet. He worked private security, the kind that didn't ask too many questions as long as the paycheck cleared. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message, then stepped back into the shadows. Amara got into her car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. But in her rearview mirror, she saw the SUV pull out and follow at a distance, its headlights never turning on. The sky over the harbor was still bruised with dawn when Amara started her run. The pier stretched out like a crooked finger pointing at the horizon, and the air smelled like salt and diesel in yesterday's catch. She ran with the easy rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, her breath steady, her stride efficient. But she wasn't just running. She was counting. 3 new cameras on the lampposts. One on the corner by the bait shop. Another near the fish market. They hadn't been there 2 days ago. She let her pace stay casual, let her eyes drift without locking on to anything, and made a mental note of each one. When she passed a bench where an old man was feeding gulls, one of the birds broke away and followed her. She let it trail her for 3 more benches, watching the reflections in the storefront windows. The black SUV from last night passed by twice, slow and deliberate, but it never stopped. They were watching. They wanted her to know they were watching. Fine, let them watch. She finished her run at a small diner called May's Kitchen, a place that served breakfast to dock workers and retirees who liked their coffee strong and their eggs runny. The owner, May Lawson, was a retired Navy nurse in her 60s with steel gray hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. She was also Amara's only real family. May looked up from the griddle when Amara walked in. "Morning, stranger." "Morning, May." Amara slid into a booth by the window, where she could see the street. "Is she up yet?" "You know she is. That girl doesn't sleep past 6. May poured a cup of coffee and brought it over. "She's in the back doing her math homework." "Again? I swear she's going to get a scholarship before she's 13. Amara smiled faintly. Nyla was her goddaughter, the daughter of a friend who died years ago in circumstances that still hurt to think about. Officially, May was Nyla's guardian. Unofficially, Amara kept watch from a distance, helping with homework, fixing breakfast, playing the role of the friendly neighbor who just happened to drop by a lot. It was safer that way. For everyone. A few minutes later, Nyla bounced into the dining room, all energy and bright eyes. She was 12, black, with her hair in neat braids and a smile that could light up a room. She saw Amara and grinned. "Aunt Amara, did you bring the algebra stuff?" "In the car. I'll grab it after breakfast." Nyla slid into the booth across from her and immediately started talking about a science project, a book she was reading, and a joke her friend had told her at school. Amara listened, nodded, asked questions, and watched the street through the window. 2 blocks away, the black SUV sat parked with its engine off. Meanwhile, across town, Cole Harrigan sat in the back corner of Dock 27, staring at the bar counter like it held the answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Rita was wiping down tables, getting ready to open for the day. She glanced at him, then walked over. "You planning to sit there all morning, or are you going to order something?" "What did she drink?" Cole asked quietly. "Rita Fronet." "Who?" "The woman. Last night. The one who put me on my ass." Rita studied him for a moment, then said, "Ginger ale. Flat." She nursed it for 2 hours and left a good tip. She paused. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Cole shook his head slowly. "I don't even know where to start." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in years. An old Intel friend from his early days, someone who owed him a favor. He hit dial and waited. The voice on the other end was cautious. "Harrigan, long time. I need a name checked. Quiet like. Call sign Viper 1. There was a long pause. "You sure you want to go down that road? Just tell me what you find." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, give me an hour." Cole hung up and sat back, rubbing his shoulder where Amara had locked the joint. It still ached. Not from injury, but from memory. That hole hadn't been something you learned in a dojo. It was field work. Real, hard-earned, combat-tested technique. An hour later, his phone buzzed. One word appeared on the screen, redacted. Cole stared at it for a long time. Then Ethan walked in, carrying a worn folder under his arm. Ethan was the quiet one on their team, the guy who noticed things, who thought before he spoke. He sat down across from Cole and slid the folder over. I did some digging. Found something you need to see. Cole opened the folder. Inside was a grainy photograph, printed on cheap paper and faded with age. It showed a pilot standing next to a helicopter in the middle of a desert. The pilot wore a flight suit, helmet under one arm, visor reflecting the sun. On the helmet, painted in careful detail, was a snake coiled and ready to strike. The face was partially obscured, but the posture was unmistakable. Viper 1, Ethan said quietly. That's from Helmand Province, about 8 years ago. She was flying cover for a convoy. Our convoy. Cole looked up sharply. What? You don't remember because you were half dead from blood loss at the time. But she's the one who pulled us out. Took fire from 3 directions and still got us to the extraction point. Ethan's voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. They told us later she didn't make it back. Mechanical failure over enemy territory. No body recovered. Cole stared at the photo. If she didn't make it back, then who the hell was in my bar last night? Good question, Ethan said. Across town, in a sleek office overlooking the marina, Dane Rourke sat across from a man in a linen jacket. The man's name was Victor Hale, and he looked like someone who spent a lot of time in conference rooms and country clubs. His hair was silver, his watch was expensive, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. On his phone, he had selfies with congressmen, senators, and at least one general. You're sure it's her? Hale asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. Positive, Rourke said. She used the name. Viper 1, and Harrigan recognized it. Hale leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Interesting. We were told she was handled years ago. Apparently not. Then we'll need to handle her now. Hale's smile didn't waver. Quietly. Efficiently. And I want confirmation this time. No more rumors. No more ghosts. Rourke nodded. He didn't particularly like Hale, but the money was good, and he had his own reasons for wanting to see Viper 1 brought down. Back in Alcara, she'd ruined an operation that would have made him rich. He'd been carrying that grudge for a long time. Later that afternoon, Amara walked into a thrift store on the edge of town. The place smelled like mothballs and old paperbacks. She browsed the shelves for a few minutes, then picked up a cassette tape, an 80s power ballad compilation that nobody had wanted for decades. She paid $2 for it, walked outside, and dropped it in the free bin by the door. 3 hours later, a fisherman with a weathered face and calloused hands stopped by the bin, picked up the cassette, and slipped it into his jacket. He walked down to the docks, climbed into a small rowboat, and headed out toward the open water. Information moved through the harbor in strange ways. Old rituals, coded gestures, things most people never noticed. Amara had learned a long time ago that the best communication networks were the ones nobody thought to watch. That evening, May found an envelope slipped under her door. No postage, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Nyla walking to school, her backpack bouncing, her smile bright. Over her face, someone had drawn a red X in marker. Below the photo, one line, "We know you're here, pilot." May's hands shook as she stared at it. She wanted to tell Amara immediately, wanted to call the police, wanted to do something. But she also knew that panic was exactly what they wanted. So she folded the envelope, tucked it into a drawer, and went to make dinner like nothing had happened. She didn't know that Amara was watching from across the street, standing in the shadow of a parked truck, her reflection caught in May's kitchen window. Amara had seen the envelope arrive. She'd watched May's face crumple and then harden, and she'd already started making plans. The next morning, Cole found Amara at a coffee stand on the pier. She was waiting for him. She didn't look surprised when he walked up. "You've been following me," she said, not unkindly. "I needed to talk." Cole's voice was quieter than it had been at the bar. "I was out of line that night. The whole thing. I was showing off, being an idiot, and I'm sorry." Amara studied him. "Why are you really here?" "Because Viper 1 saved my life." And if someone's coming after her, I owe her. He paused. I owe you. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she wrote an address on a napkin and handed it to him. 9 tonight. Come alone. If you're late, the door stays locked. That night, Rita closed dock 27 early and led Cole, Ethan, and Amara into the storage room behind the bar. The space smelled like stale beer and cardboard, and the only furniture was a stack of kegs and an old folding table. Amara spread a map across the table, marked with notes and photographs. His name is Victor Hale, she said, pointing to a picture of the man in the linen jacket. He runs a network of shell companies tied to defense contracts. Officially, he's a consultant. Unofficially, he's running a black-budget program called Ouroboros. What's Ouroboros? Ethan asked. A snake that eats its own tail, Amara said. It's a program that disappears people, erases records, and creates ghosts. Like me. Cole frowned. Why would they want to erase you? Because I refused an order, Amara said simply. And the mission went bad. They needed someone to blame. Before anyone could respond, Amara's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her entire body went still. Cole saw the color drain from her face. What is it? He asked. Amara turned the phone so they could see. It was a live video feed, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. Nyla, standing outside a corner store, looking at candy through the window. And in the background, sliding into frame, a black SUV. They moved faster than I expected, Amara said, her voice tight. She grabbed a small case from her jacket, checked the contents, and headed for the back door. Where are you going? Cole called after her. Amara didn't answer. She was already gone. The corner store video had been taken less than 3 minutes ago, which meant Amara had maybe 5 minutes before whoever was watching Nyla made their move. She ran through the back alleys behind the harbor, her boots splashing through puddles left from yesterday's rain. The quickest route cut through the fish market's loading dock, past a marine supply warehouse, and came out 2 blocks from a store. Her lungs burned, but she kept her breathing controlled. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. The corner store was one of those old places that sold everything from lottery tickets to fishing bait, run by a Korean couple who'd been there for 30 years. Nyla liked to stop there after school for candy, and Amara had specifically told May it was safe. She'd checked the sight lines, noted the security cameras, marked it as low risk. She'd been wrong. Amara slowed as she approached, pulling a small device from her pocket. It looked like a car key fob, but when she pressed the button, it sent out a localized electromagnetic pulse that would scramble any Wi-Fi signals within 20 feet for about 90 seconds. Not enough to fry electronics, just enough to create interference. Security cameras would keep recording, but they wouldn't be able to transmit live feeds. She slipped the device back into her pocket and moved around to the side entrance. Through the window, she could see Nyla standing by the candy aisle, debating between 2 different chocolate bars. And approaching her from the front of the store were 2 men in casual clothes, both wearing the kind of bland, forgettable outfits that screamed professional. One of them was holding a phone with a picture on the screen, probably of a lost dog or a missing cat. The classic approach. Amara recognized the tactic immediately. Get the kid's attention with something innocent, something that would make her lower her guard. Then, once they had her talking, they'd steer her outside where a vehicle would be waiting. She moved fast. The side door was unlocked, which was either careless or intentional. Amara pushed through and walked straight toward the men, her movement drawing their attention just as the first one opened his mouth to speak to Nyla. Nyla, your grandmother's looking for you, Amara said calmly, not breaking stride. Nyla's face lit up. And Amara, I know, sweetheart. We need to go. Now. One of the men stepped forward, putting himself between Amara and Nyla. He was broad-shouldered, early 40s, with the kind of neutral expression that people practiced in front of mirrors. Excuse me, ma'am. We're just asking this young lady if she's seen our dog. She hasn't, Amara said flatly. Move. The man's partner shifted slightly, his hand drifting toward his jacket. Amara caught the movement and acted before he could follow through. She closed the distance in 2 steps, her hand shooting out and striking a nerve cluster just below his collarbone. His arm went numb instantly, and his knees buckled. The first man reached for her, but she was already pivoting. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, just hard enough to knock the wind out of him, then swept his legs. He went down hard, his head bouncing off a display of potato chips. The whole thing took maybe 4 seconds. Nyla, closet. Now. Nyla, eyes wide but trusting, ran to the supply closet at the back of the store. Amara followed, pulling her inside and shutting the door. She yanked out her phone and sent a rapid series of texts to May. The first was a code phrase they'd established years ago, Blue Autumn 12. It meant immediate relocation protocol. May would know what to do. The second text went to Cole, 2 down at Patterson's corner store. More coming. Get Ethan and watch May's kitchen. She pocketed her phone and looked at Nyla, who was breathing fast but staying quiet. Smart kid. We're okay, Amara said gently. But we need to stay here for a few minutes. Can you do that? Nyla nodded, then whispered. Who were those men? Bad people who made a mistake. Amara checked her watch. 70 seconds since the EMP. The jammer would wear off soon, and when it did, whoever was coordinating this would know their team had failed. Outside the closet, she could hear groaning and the shuffle of boots. The 2 men were getting back up, which meant they were tougher than average. That was useful information. 5 minutes later, a black sedan screeched to a halt outside the store, and Dane Rourke stepped out, his face tight with anger. He walked inside, saw his 2 men leaning against the counter, one holding his ribs and the other flexing his numb arm, and his jaw clenched. Where is she? Gone, one of them muttered. She hit us before we even saw her move. Rourke looked around the store, noting the supply closet, the back exit, the carefully arranged angles that would have hidden someone's escape. He pulled something from his pocket and set on the counter, a single brass shell casing, engraved with a spiral pattern, the symbol of Ouroboros. Make sure the cameras catch this, he said to the store owner, who was standing behind the register looking terrified. Then Rourke smiled directly at the security camera mounted in the corner. We'll be seeing you soon, Blake. By that time, Amara and Nyla were already 6 blocks away, moving through a residential neighborhood where hedges and fences provided cover. Amara had called May again, and May had activated the network. The network was something they'd built slowly over the years, a loose collection of veterans, retirees, and people who owed May favors. They didn't ask questions, and they didn't hesitate. Within 20 minutes, 3 vans from the local VFW hall were running shuttle practice routes through town, each one picking up and dropping off passengers in a carefully choreographed pattern designed to confuse surveillance. Nyla ended up in the back of a van driven by a 70-year-old former Marine named Frank, who offered her a butterscotch candy and told her stories about his grandkids while he drove her to a safe house on the other side of town. Amara watched the van disappear around a corner, then turned and headed back toward Dock 27. She had work to do. Cole had gotten Amara's text and immediately grabbed Ethan. They'd been sitting in Cole's truck outside May's kitchen, watching the street, when they saw May step outside and make a phone call. Her body language was tense, but controlled. A few minutes later, the VFW vans started rolling through, and Cole understood. She's running a shell game, Ethan said quietly, moving the kid through multiple vehicles so nobody can track which one she's in. Smart, Cole admitted. His phone buzzed. A message from Mara. Meet at Dock 27. Bring the photo. Cole looked at Ethan. You still have that Hellman picture? Ethan nodded and pulled the folder from under his seat. They arrived at the bar just after sunset. Rita let them in through the back door, her expression grim. She's in the storage room, and she's pissed. Amara was standing at the folding table, her jacket off, her movements precise as she laid out equipment, a laptop, a small black case, and several printed photographs. She looked up when Cole and Ethan entered. Tell me about Rourke, she said without preamble. Cole blinked. How do you know that name? Because he left his calling card. She tossed the shell casing onto the table. Ouroboros mark. That means he's working directly for Hale, and he wants me to know it. Ethan picked up the casing, studying the engraving. Dan Rourke, former Army Ranger, discharged under circumstances nobody talks about. Last I heard, he was doing contract work in the Middle East. He was, Amara said, Al-Qura, specifically. He was running security for an off-books operation that involved moving weapons through civilian areas. I reported it. The operation got shut down. Rourke lost his contract and about $2 million. She paused. He's wanted revenge ever since. Cole set the folder on the table and opened it, showing her the photograph from Helmand. Ethan says you saved our convoy, that you flew cover under fire and got us to extraction. Amara looked at the photo for a long moment, her expression unreadable. That was a long time ago. The report said you were Kia, Ethan said quietly. Mechanical failure over enemy territory. The report lied. Amara closed the folder. I refused a strike order 3 weeks after that convoy rescue. Command wanted me to hit a target in a civilian area, said it was a high-value insurgent. I did my recon, saw it was a hospital, and refused. They sent someone else. The strike happened anyway. 32 people died, including children. The room went very quiet. I filed a complaint, Amara continued. I had evidence, HUD footage, everything. 2 weeks later, my helicopter had a malfunction during a routine flight. I barely made it down alive. When I tried to report back, I was told I'd been declared Kia and my records were classified. She looked at Cole. Hale was the one who orchestrated it. He needed a scapegoat, and I was convenient. Cole's hands curled into fists. So you've been hiding ever since? Not hiding, watching, waiting. She opened the black case, revealing a compact hard drive. I've spent 8 years gathering evidence. Names, dates, transactions. Everything that proves Ouroboros exists and what they've done. But I need more. I need the original files, the ones they think they buried. Where are those? Ethan asked. Before Amara could answer, the door burst open. Rita stood there, her face pale. You need to see this. She led them to the bar's small office, where a television was tuned to a local news station. The screen showed footage from the corner store, zoomed in on the counter where Rourke had left the shell casing. The news anchor's voice was grave. Authorities are investigating what they're calling a possible domestic terror incident at a local convenience store. 2 men were assaulted, and this symbol was left at the scene. Anyone with information is urged to contact. Rita muted the television. They're spinning it, making you look like the bad guy. Amara's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. That's what Hale does. Control the narrative. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it and felt her blood go cold. It was a live video feed. May, sitting at her kitchen table, hands folded, looking directly at the camera. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure with a gun. The message below the video was simple. Trade. You for her. Pier 9. Midnight. Cole looked over her shoulder and swore. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap, Amara said. She looked at the clock on the wall. 3 hours until midnight, which is why we're not walking into it. What's the plan? Ethan asked. Amara pulled out her laptop and started typing. We're going to give them exactly what they want. Me, but not the way they expect. Rain started falling around 10 o'clock, light at first, then building into a steady downpour that turned the streets slick and dark. Amara sat in the back of Cole's truck, parked 3 blocks from a machine shop on the edge of town. Her laptop was open, displaying a blueprint of the building's interior. This is where Hale's logistics run through, she explained, pointing to a section of the blueprint. It's disguised as a machine shop, but the back half is all servers and storage. The manifests I need are in there. If we can get those, we'll have proof of every transaction Ouroboros has made for the last decade. And May? Cole asked. May's smart. She knows how to buy time. Amara's voice was steady, but Cole could see the tension in her shoulders. We get the files first, then we deal with the pier. Ethan had been watching the machine shop through binoculars. They've got a rotation schedule. 3 guards on the exterior, 2 inside. There's a shift change at 11, which gives us about a 20-minute window when they're understaffed. We'll need a distraction, Cole said. Amara pulled out her phone. Already arranged. At exactly 11 o'clock, Priya Anand, the EMT who'd become part of their unlikely team, placed a call to the city's inspection office. She used a calm, professional voice to report an electrical hazard at a building 2 blocks from the machine shop, something about exposed wiring and a smell of burning insulation. Within minutes, a fire inspector was dispatched. At the same time, Tuck Morrison, the dock mechanic who could fix anything with an engine, drove past the machine shop's main gate and accidentally clipped the corner post with his truck, jamming the automatic gate halfway open. The guards rushed to deal with both problems, and in the confusion, Amara slipped through a side door that Tuck had helpfully left unlocked during a repair visit 3 days earlier. Inside, the machine shop smelled like oil and metal. The front section was legitimate, full of industrial equipment and half-finished projects. But Amara moved straight to the back, where a locked door marked office. Authorized personnel only hid the real operation. She pulled a small tool from her pocket, something that looked like a modified Allen wrench, and worked the lock. It took her 40 seconds, which was 30 seconds longer than she would have liked, but the door clicked open. The back room was exactly what she'd expected. Rows of server racks, their lights blinking in the darkness, and a locked cabinet against the far wall. She moved to the cabinet and found what she was looking for, a set of hard drives labeled with dates and locations, and one marked Training, Phase 3. She was pulling the drives when she heard a voice behind her. "Please don't shoot me." Amara spun, her hand moving to the knife at her belt, but she stopped when she saw the person standing in the doorway. He was young, mid-20s, with messy brown hair and glasses that were slightly crooked. He wore a badge that identified him as Milo Chun, IT support. "Who are you?" Amara asked quietly. "Someone who's been trying to find you for 6 months," Milo said, his voice shaking. He held up a thumb drive. "I know who you are. Viper 1, the pilot who wouldn't bomb the hospital." Amara's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm the one who's been siphoning files from Hale's servers. I'm the one who figured out what Ouroboros really is." Milo took a step closer, and Amara could see genuine fear in his eyes. "I've been waiting for someone to give these files to. Someone who wouldn't sell me out or disappear me." Outside, Cole's voice crackled through the small earpiece Amara wore. "Viper, we've got movement. Someone just pulled into the lot. You need to move." Amara looked at Milo, calculating. "If you're lying to me." "I'm not. I swear." He held out the thumb drive. "Take it, please." She took the drive and pocketed it, then moved to the cabinet and began cloning the hard drives onto a portable device she'd brought. "How long have you worked here?" 8 months. I thought it was just defense contracting at first, but then I started seeing the files. Training videos that weren't simulations. Footage that looked too real." Milo's voice dropped. "They're using actual war crime footage to desensitize contractors, turning them into people who won't question orders." Amara's hands kept moving, but her jaw tightened. "What made you think I'd help?" "Because you already did. You refused the order. You tried to stop it." Milo paused. "That's more than anyone else did." The clone finished, and Amara pocketed the device. But she did one more thing. She took the original hard drive labeled Training, Phase 3, and hid it behind an air vent, attaching a small mercury battery that would ping a locational signal only when the building's air conditioning cycled on. A breadcrumb, in case everything went wrong. "Come on," she said to Milo. "You're coming with us." They slipped out through the side door, just as another vehicle pulled up. Amara recognized it immediately, a black SUV with government plates. She pulled Milo into the shadows and waited. 2 men stepped out of the SUV, both wearing suits that were too nice for this part of town. They walked into the machine shop like they owned it, and one of them was on the phone, his voice carrying through the rain. "Yes, sir. We're confirming the location now. Blake should be at Pier 9 within the hour." Amara's earpiece crackled again. "Viper, you're clear to move. Rita is running interference." Amara nodded to Milo, and they ran through the rain to where Cole and Ethan were waiting. They piled into the truck, and Cole pulled away without turning on the headlights, navigating by memory and ambient light until they were several blocks clear. Back at Dock 27, they spread the files across the storage room table. Milo's thumb drive was full of documents, contracts, invoices, personnel records. But the clone hard drive was the real prize. Amara opened the first file, and her stomach turned. It was HUD footage from a helicopter. Her helicopter. She recognized the instrument panel, the angle, even the small scratch on the display screen. The footage showed a strike mission, targeting coordinates that matched the hospital in Al-Qara. But the audio had been edited. In the original, she'd refused the strike, calling for abort and citing civilian presence. In this version, Her voice was cut and spliced to make it sound like she'd confirmed the target and authorized the attack. "They framed you," Cole said quietly. "Perfectly," Amara replied, her voice hollow. The next file showed a manifest of names: pilots, soldiers, contractors, each one marked with a status. Most were listed as active or retired, but a few, including Amara's, were marked neutralized. And then she saw another name that made her freeze. Nyla Wright. Status: dependent watch list. She clicked on the entry. It opened to a file that included Nyla's school records, May's service history, and a detailed timeline of Amara's visits. Everything documented, everything tracked. They'd been watching Nyla for years, using her as insurance to keep Amara quiet. Amara's hands started to shake. She thought she kept Nyla safe by staying distant, by being careful. But they'd known all along. They kept accounts on a child, she said, her voice dangerous. Ethan, who'd been scrolling through another section of files, suddenly stopped. "Cole, you need to see this." Cole leaned over, and his face went pale. It was an operation report from 5 years ago, detailing a convoy escort mission through a disputed zone. Cole's team had been assigned to provide security for what they'd been told were humanitarian supplies. The report showed photos of the cargo: weapons, ammunition, materials that could be used for explosives. And Cole's signature was on the authorization form. "I never signed this," Cole said, his voice rising. "We were told it was medical supplies. Food and water for refugees." "They forged it," Amara said. "Just like they forged my flight log." Hale's good at making people complicit without them knowing. Cole sat down hard, his head in his hands. Those shipments. They disappeared 3 towns. The warlords used them to wipe out entire villages. He looked up, his eyes red. "I helped them do that." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Hale helped them do that. You were the cover. There's a difference." But Cole didn't look convinced. Milo had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "There's more." The files show a storage location for the original, unedited archives. Everything they've tried to bury. It's at a place called Beacon Point. "The old lighthouse," Amara said. "It was decommissioned 5 years ago. Now at a data vault," Milo explained. "Biometric locks, isolated servers, the whole setup. If you can get inside, you can access the raw footage. Everything they've edited, everything they've hidden." Amara looked at the map, calculating distances, angles, approach vectors. "It's a fortress. It's also your only chance to clear your name," Milo said, "and to take down Ouroboros for good." Amara's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number, this time with an updated video of May. The timestamp showed it was recorded 5 minutes ago. May looked tired but unharmed. The message: "Clock's ticking, pilot. Pier 9, 1 hour." Amara stood and grabbed her jacket. "Cole, Ethan, you're with me. We're hitting the lighthouse tonight." "What about May?" Cole asked. "May knows how to survive. And if we get those files, we can end this." Amara's voice was steel. "Hale wants me alive because he thinks he can control the narrative. Let's prove him wrong." Outside, the rain was coming down harder now, turning the streets into rivers. In the distance, thunder rumbled like a warning. At Pier 9, Rourke stood under an awning, watching the storm and checking his watch. He'd set the trap perfectly, positioned his men, made sure all the exits were covered. Blake would come. He was sure of it. What he didn't know was that his phone had been compromised 3 hours ago, when Milo had sent a silent backdoor command through the network. Every message Rourke received, every plan he made, was being mirrored to a server that Amara could access. She wasn't walking into his trap. She was building one of her own. And it started at a lighthouse on the edge of the world, where the truth was buried under layers of lies and locked behind biometric doors that she'd spent 8 years planning to breach. The storm raged on, and in the darkness, 3 vehicles moved through the rain toward Beacon Point. Amara sat in the passenger seat of Cole's truck, loading her flight gloves onto her hands. The same gloves she'd worn on her last mission. The ones with her initials burned faintly into the leather. Cole glanced at her. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready for 8 years, Amara said. "Let's finish it." The storm had turned vicious by the time they reached Beacon Point. Wind howled across the cliffs, whipping rain sideways and making it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. The lighthouse stood like a sentinel against the black sky, its beams sweeping across the ocean in steady intervals, each flash revealing white-capped waves that crashed against the rocks below. Amara stood at the edge of the warehouse pier, watching the rhythm of the light. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. 7 seconds between each rotation. That was her window. Cole pulled up beside her in his truck, with Ethan in the passenger seat and Milo hunched in the back, clutching a laptop like it was the only solid thing in the world. Priya arrived moments later in her EMT van, which she'd stocked with enough medical supplies to handle whatever went wrong tonight. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Amara asked, her voice cutting through the wind. Cole nodded. "We approach from the south wall during the dark intervals. Milo gets us through the biometric locks. We grab the data core and get out before Hale's people realize what's happening. And if they realize," Priya asked. "Then we improvise," Amara said simply. She checked her gear one last time. The flight gloves were snug on her hands, the leather worn soft from years of use. Cole had noticed them earlier, seeing the initials burned faintly into the inside of the left glove. He'd asked if they belonged to her father, and she'd corrected him with a single word, "Mine." They were the gloves she'd worn on her last official mission, the one where she'd refused the strike order and started the chain of events that led to her supposed death. Wearing them tonight felt right, like closing a circle that had been open too long. "Let's move," she said. They left the vehicles and made their way down to the water's edge, where a small boat waited. It was nothing fancy, just a fishing vessel that Tuck had borrowed from a friend who owed him a favor. The engine was quiet, modified to run almost silent, and the hull was painted dark gray to blend with the storm. Amara took the helm, her pilot instincts translating easily to the water. She guided them along the coast, timing their movements to the lighthouse beam. Every 7 seconds, the lights swept over them, and in those moments, she cut the engine and let the boat drift. To anyone watching from the lighthouse, they'd be nearly invisible, just another piece of debris riding the storm. As they got closer, Ethan used night vision binoculars to scan the perimeter. "I count 3 guards on the exterior, 2 on the north side, 1 on the east. They're using the old keeper's cottage as a command post." "What about the lighthouse itself?" Cole asked. "Looks clear, but there's tripwires on the rocks. Someone comes up the normal path, they'll know about it." "Good thing we're not using the normal path," Amara said. She brought the boat around to the south side of the lighthouse, where the cliff face was steep and craggy. The rocks jutted out at harsh angles, covered in barnacles and slick with spray. It wasn't a place anyone would expect an approach, which made it perfect. "This is insane," Milo muttered, staring up at the cliff. "Stay in the boat," Amara told him. "We'll signal when we need you." Shh, and Cole prepared to climb. They had ropes, harnesses, and enough experience between them to make it work. Ethan stayed in the boat with Milo and Priya, ready to provide support if things went sideways. The climb was brutal. The rain made every handhold treacherous, and the wind tried to tear them off the rock face. Amara's muscles burned, her fingers aching from gripping the rough stone, but she kept moving. She'd flown through worse conditions than this. At least here, if she fell, it would be quick. Halfway up, Cole's foot slipped. He caught himself, but the sudden movement dislodged a chunk of rock that tumbled down into the water with a splash. They both froze, waiting to see if anyone had heard. The lighthouse beam swept past. Once, twice. No alarm, no shouts. They were still clear. "Keep going," Amara whispered. They reached the top and pulled themselves over the edge, landing on a narrow strip of rocky ground at the base of the lighthouse. The building was old, its white paint peeling and stained with salt, but the door looked new. Heavy steel with a biometric scanner mounted beside it. Amara pulled out a small radio and keyed it twice. The signal for Milo. A minute later, her phone buzzed with a text. "Scanning now. Hold position." Milo was using a remote exploit he'd developed, something that could trick the biometric scanner into thinking it had received a valid authorization. It wasn't foolproof, but it was better than trying to hack the system manually. The scanner's light changed from red to green. The door clicked open. "We're in," Amara said quietly to Cole. "Stay sharp." They slipped inside, and the difference was immediate. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the air was still and humming with the sound of electronics. The lighthouse interior had been completely gutted and rebuilt. Where there should have been spiral stairs and empty space, there were now server racks rising floor to ceiling, their lights blinking in synchronized patterns. The air was cool and dry, kept at optimal temperature for the equipment. "This is what a ghost looks like," Cole muttered, staring at the servers. "All the secrets they buried, right here." Amara moved toward the center of the room, where a console stood isolated on a raised platform. That would be the access point for the data core, the master archive that controlled everything else. She climbed the platform and pulled out the device Milo had given her, a small external drive that would let her clone the entire system. She was plugging it in when she heard the voice. "I heard you died clean, Blake. Let's make it official this time." Dane Rourke stepped out from behind one of the server racks on the upper level, a gun in his hand. He looked different than he had in the surveillance photos, older and harder, with scars that told stories he'd never share willingly. His smile was cold and satisfied. "You really thought we wouldn't see you coming?" Rourke said. "Hale's been tracking your movements since you hit the machine shop. He wanted you here, wanted you to think you had a chance." Amara's hand moved slowly toward the knife at her belt, but Rourke shook his head. "Don't. I've got 3 men outside, and they've already got your boat surrounded. You're done." Cole stepped forward, positioning himself between Amara and Rourke. "You don't have to do this, Rourke. Whatever Hale's paying you, it's not worth it." "It's not about the money," Rourke said, his voice dropping. "Blake here cost me everything in Alcara. I was set for life, and she ruined it because she decided to grow a conscience." He shifted his aim toward Cole. "Now step aside, Seal. This isn't your fight." "Actually," Cole said, "it is." Then he moved, not toward Rourke but to the side, drawing fire away from Amara. Rourke's shot went wide, punching through a server rack and sending sparks flying. Alarms started blaring immediately, and the lights shifted to emergency red. Amara didn't waste the opening. She grabbed the external drive, making sure it had started the download, then rolled off the platform as another shot rang out. She came up with her knife in hand, her movements fluid and controlled. Ethan's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Viper, we've got movement. 3 hostiles heading your way from the cottage." "Copy," Amara said. She looked at Cole. "We need to buy time. The download needs 5 minutes." "Then we hold for 5 minutes," Cole said, pulling his own sidearm. Rourke fired again, this time aiming for the console. The shot hit the external drive, shattering its casing. Amara's heart sank, but then she saw the display. The data was still transferring, running on emergency battery power even with the casing destroyed. "You're not taking anything out of here," Rourke snarled. He started down the stairs from the upper level, his gun trained on Amara. "Hale wants you alive, but he'll settle for proof you're dead. Your choice." Amara met his eyes. "I've been dead for 8 years, Rourke." "You're late." She threw the knife, not at Rourke, but at the support cable for the server rack beside him. The blade cut through the cable, and the rack tilted, its weight shifting dangerously. Rourke stumbled back, firing wildly, and the rack came down in a screaming crash of metal and sparking electronics. The external drive beeped. Download complete. Amara grabbed it and ran toward the door, Cole right behind her. They burst out into the storm just as Rourke's reinforcements arrived. 3 men in tactical gear, moving with the precision of trained operators. "Go!" Cole shouted, and he turned to lay down suppressive fire. Amara hesitated for half a second, then made a decision. She pulled a small device from her pocket, the same EMP scrambler she'd used at the corner store, and tossed it back into the lighthouse. It wouldn't do much to the hardened servers, but it would buy them a few seconds of confusion. Then she and Cole were rappelling down the cliff face, the ropes singing in the wind. Below, Ethan had the boat ready, engine running. They dropped into the vessel, and Ethan gunned it, the boat leaping forward and cutting through the waves. Behind them, the lighthouse beam swept across the water, searching, but the storm swallowed them, and within minutes, they were just another shadow on the dark ocean. Milo was hunched over his laptop, his face pale but determined. "Did you get it?" Amara held up the drive, its casing cracked, but its lights still blinking. "We got it." Good, Milo said, his voice shaking. Because Hale just sent a message. He's moving May. If we don't meet him at the original location in 30 minutes, he's going to disappear her permanently. Cole looked at Amara. What do you want to do? Amara stared at the lighthouse, its beams still cutting through the storm like a blade. She thought about May, about Nyla, about all the people Hale had disappeared over the years. She thought about the hospital in Alcura and the children who died because she hadn't been enough to stop it. We go get May, she said, and we end this tonight. They regrouped at a safe house on the edge of town, an old boathouse that belonged to one of May's VFW contacts. It smelled like mildew and motor oil, but it had electricity and a solid internet connection, which was all Milo needed. He set up his laptop on a workbench and plugged in the damaged external drive. For a tense minute, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered to life, and data started scrolling past. It's intact, Milo said, relief flooding his voice. Everything's here. Flight logs, mission reports, unedited HUD footage. He looked at Amara. This is it. This is your proof. Amara leaned over his shoulder, watching the files populate. She found her own mission folder and opened it. The video started playing, and she heard her own voice from 8 years ago, clear and unmistakable. Abort strike. Target not confirmed. I repeat, abort. I have eyes on civilian structures. This is a hospital. The next voice was one she didn't recognize, cold and authoritative. Strike authorized by command override. Viper 1, you are ordered to execute. Negative. I will not engage a civilian target. Then you're relieved of command. Viper 2, you are weapons free. The video showed another helicopter moving into position, and then the screen flashed white as the missiles launched. When the image cleared, the hospital was gone, replaced by rubble and fire. Cole, watching over her other shoulder, said quietly, "Who gave the override order?" Milo pulled up another file, cross-referencing the audio signature with command records. A name appeared on the screen, Vice Admiral Richard Kensington. He's based in D.C., Ethan said. Joint Chiefs Liaison to Congressional Oversight. He got enough power to bury anything he wants. And Hale was his fixer, Amara said, her voice flat. The person who made the problems disappear. She scrolled through more files and found a manifest they'd seen at the machine shop, but these were more detailed. Names of people who'd been targeted by Ouroboros, along with their status. Most were marked neutralized or compromised. A few, like Amara, were marked Ghost Protocol, which apparently meant they'd been declared dead but were still under surveillance. Then she found May's file. It showed her entire service record, every commendation, every deployment. And at the bottom, in red text, leverage asset. Do not engage directly. Monitor for Blake contact. Amara's hands tightened on the edge of the workbench. They've been using May as bait for years. And Nyla, Milo added, pulling up another file. She's listed as secondary leverage. They were going to use her to force you into compliance if May wasn't enough. The room went very quiet. Priya, who'd been checking her medical supplies in the corner, spoke up. So what's the play? We have the evidence. We can send it to every news outlet in the country. Hale will just spin it, Amara said. He'll call it fabricated, say we're terrorists or enemy agents. The story will be buried before it gets traction. Then what do we do? Priya asked. Amara turned to Milo. Can you broadcast this through military channels? Make it so every base, every command center, every ship sees it at the same time. Milo's eyes widened. That's technically possible, but it would take a lot of bandwidth and a direct link to the defense network. Miramar, Ethan said suddenly. Naval Air Station Miramar. It's got old broadcast equipment from when it was used for training. If we can get physical access, we can push the signal through the military satellite network. Cole nodded slowly. It's risky. Miramar's an active base. Security's tight. But it's where Viper was born, Amara said, remembering what Jameson had told her. The analyst who'd confessed to hiding her original mission file. It's where this all started. Seems fitting to end it there. Before anyone could respond, Cole's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's Rita. He answered on speaker. Rita's voice came through, tense and urgent. Cole, you need to know something. The bar just got raided. Federal agents, search warrants, the whole thing. They're looking for evidence of domestic terrorism. Did they find anything? Cole asked. Nothing to find. But they're holding me for questioning, and they've frozen the bar's accounts. Rito posed. They also released footage to the media. Doctored security camera video from Doc 27, making it look like Amara attacked you unprovoked. Amara closed her eyes. Hale's controlling the narrative, making me the villain so nobody listens when the truth comes out. There's more, Rita said. I overheard the agents talking. They said there's a warrant out for May too. Accessory to terrorism. If they find her, she's going to federal lockup. Cole thanked Rita and hung up. He looked at Amara. We're running out of time. Then we move now, Amara said. She turned to Milo. How long to set up the broadcast at Miramar? If everything goes perfectly, 20 minutes. More realistically, 45. We'll give you 30, Amara said. She looked at the rest of the team. Cole, Ethan, you're with me. Priya, you stay here with Milo. If we're not back in 2 hours, you send the files to every journalist you can think of. Flood the zone. Priya nodded. What about May? May's smart enough to stay hidden until we can clear her name. Amara's voice was steady, but Cole could see the worry in her eyes. She knows how to survive. What they didn't know was that May wasn't hiding. She was sitting in the back of a black SUV, her hands zip-tied, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. Across from her sat Victor Hale, impeccable in his suit. Scrolling through his phone like this was just another Tuesday. You raised her well, Hale said conversationally. Blake, I mean. She's resourceful, determined, almost impossible to predict. He looked up, smiling. But everyone has a weakness. And you, Mrs. Lawson, are hers. May met his eyes without flinching. You're going to lose. I don't lose, Hale said simply. I adapt. If Blake goes public, I have a dozen contingencies. If she tries to come for you, we'll be ready. And if she manages to survive all of that, well, he gestured to the driver. We'll simply start over somewhere else. New names, new contracts, new ghosts. You're a coward, May said. Hale's smile didn't waver. I'm a realist. The world needs people like Ouroboros. We do the things that everyone pretends don't happen. We make the hard calls so that politicians can keep their hands clean. He leaned forward. Blake thinks she's fighting for justice. But all she's really doing is making sure the next war is messier, bloodier, less controlled. Is that really what you want? I want the truth, May said. And so does she. The truth, Hale said, sitting back, is whatever people believe it to be. And I'm very good at managing belief. The SUV pulled up to a private airfield. Hale's phone buzzed, and he read the message, his expression shifting slightly. It seems your goddaughter is more resourceful than I gave her credit for. She's heading to Miramar. He typed a quick response, then looked at May. Change of plans. We're going to meet her there. And this time, we're going to make sure the ending sticks. At Miramar, Amara and Cole moved through the shadows of the old training facility. The base was active, but the section where the vintage simulators were kept had been mothballed years ago. Security was light, mostly cameras and motion sensors that Milo had already looped from his remote location. They reached the hangar where Viper Unit 1 had been stored, and Amara felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The building looked exactly as she remembered it, down to the faded warning signs and the rust on the door hinges. Inside, dust motes floated in the dim light. The simulator sat in the center of the space, looking like a relic from another lifetime. It was just a cockpit shell now, stripped of most of its electronics, but the basic frame remained intact. This is it, Amara said quietly. Where they trained me, where I became Viper 1. She climbed into the simulator and found the access panel behind the pilot's seat. Inside was a small storage compartment, and tucked into that compartment was a flash drive wrapped in protective plastic. Her hands shook slightly as she unwrapped it. This was the original file, the one Jameson had saved. The proof that couldn't be edited or erased. Got it, she said to Cole. Ethan's voice came through the radio. We got a problem. Multiple vehicles just entered the base. Federal plates. They're heading your way. Cole swore. How did they know? Because I told them, said a voice from the hangar entrance. They turned to see Hale walking in, flanked by armed men. And behind them, being dragged by 2 more guards, was May. Amara's entire body tensed. "Let her go, Hale." "Not quite yet," Hale said pleasantly. He gestured to his men, and they fanned out, cutting off the exits. "You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, Blake. Time to settle accounts." "You're the one who should be in cuffs," Cole said, his hand moving toward his sidearm. "I wouldn't," Hale said. One of his men pressed a gun against May's temple. "Let's keep this civil." Amara stepped forward, the flash drive in her hand. "This is what you're afraid of, isn't it? The truth. The unedited footage showing you gave the kill order. Showing Kensington authorized a war crime." Hale's smile thinned. "That footage proves nothing. Context is everything, and I control the context." "Not anymore," Amara said. She held up her phone. On the screen was a live feed from Milo's laptop. "While you were monologuing, my team uploaded everything to the military satellite network. Right now, every base in the world is seeing your files. Every commander, every analyst, every officer." Hale's face went pale. He grabbed his own phone, checking, and his expression darkened. "You're bluffing." "Check your messages," Amara said calmly. Hale's phone started buzzing. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. He stared at it, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You just signed your own death warrant." "Maybe," Amara said. "But I signed yours too." For a long moment, nobody moved, then May did something unexpected. She drove her elbow backward into the guard's stomach, twisted away from his grip, and dropped to the floor. The hangar erupted into chaos. Cole drew his weapon. Ethan burst through a side door, laying down, covering fire. And Amara moved like she'd been trained to move, fast and precise, disarming the nearest guard and using him as a shield. Hale ran, his men scrambling to protect him. But outside the hangar, sirens were already wailing. Military police, base security, responding to the upload that had just exposed Ouroboros to the entire defense network. Amara helped May to her feet. "You okay?" May nodded, breathing hard. "Never better." They watched as Hale was surrounded by MPs, his hands raised, his face twisted with fury. He was shouting something about jurisdiction, about immunity, but nobody was listening. It was over. Or at least, the first part was over. The files were out. The truth was spreading. And for the first time in 8 years, Amara Blake wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground. The arrest of Victor Hale should have been the end of the story, but Amara knew better. Men like Hale didn't stay down easily, and the networks they built had redundancies, fail-safes, and lawyers who could delay justice for years. She was right to be cautious. 3 days after the Miramar incident, while the military was still processing the uploaded files and the media was starting to piece together the Ouroboros story, Amara woke up in a place she didn't recognize. Her head throbbed, and her mouth tasted like copper. She tried to move and realized her wrists were zip-tied behind her back. Her ankles were bound too. She was sitting in a metal chair in what looked like a cargo hangar, the kind used for storage at military installations. Floodlights glared down from the ceiling, making it impossible to see into the shadows beyond their reach. "Welcome back, Viper One." The voice came from directly in front of her. As her eyes adjusted, she saw Hale standing there, somehow free, somehow still in control. He wore civilian clothes now, crisp and clean, and his expression was calm. Too calm. "How?" Amara asked, her voice rough. "Money and connections," Hale said simply. "Bail was set, and I made it. My lawyers are very good at what they do." He walked closer, his hands clasped behind his back. "The files you uploaded caused quite a stir. But here's what you don't understand about the system, Blake. It's designed to protect itself. Vice Admiral Kensington is already being quietly retired. I'll face some congressional hearings, pay some fines, maybe do a few months in a minimum security facility that's nicer than most hotels. And Ouroboros?" Amara asked. "Will be rebranded, restructured, and operational again within a year. How dissimulate? Because the world still needs what we provide. The politicians might condemn us publicly, but privately, they'll keep signing the checks." Amara tested her restraints. They were tight, professional. "So why am I here?" "Because you were supposed to be an experiment," Hale said. "Project Viper wasn't just about you. It was about creating obedient ghosts. Pilots, operatives, people who would follow orders without question. You were the prototype, and you failed. He leaned closer. Now I'm going to give you one last chance to be useful. He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward her. On the screen was live footage of Cole and May sitting in what looked like a detention facility. Both were in orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed. Your friends are being held as accessories to your crimes, Hale explained. Aiding a domestic terrorist, conspiracy to commit treason. The charges are quite extensive. But I can make them disappear. I can have them released, cleared, their records wiped clean. In exchange for what? Amara asked, though she already knew. A confession. On camera. You admit that you went rogue, that you fabricated the evidence, that everything Ouroboros did was justified and necessary. You take full responsibility, and you do it convincingly. Hale's smile widened. Do that, and your friends walk free. Refuse, and they spend the rest of their lives in prison. Amara looked at the footage, at May's tired face and Cole's clenched jaw. Then she looked back at Hale. That's not who I trained to be. Hale's expression hardened. Then you're more foolish than I thought. He turned and walked toward the shadows. I'll give you some time to reconsider. Think carefully, Blake. This is the only offer you're going to get. The floodlights cut out, plunging the hangar into darkness. Amara sat alone, her mind racing. She tested the zip ties again, feeling for any weakness. They were standard military grade, designed to hold even under significant stress. But they hadn't checked her boots. She'd learned a long time ago to keep tools hidden in unexpected places. In the heel of her right boot was a small ceramic blade, no bigger than a razor. It had gotten her out of situations before, and it would get her out of this one. She worked her bound hands down, arching her back and contorting until she could reach her boot. Her shoulders screamed in protest, but she kept going. Finally, her fingers found the heel, pressed the release, and the blade dropped into her palm. It took 10 minutes of careful sawing to cut through the zip ties. When her hands were free, she made quick work of the ankle restraints and stood, testing her balance. Her head still hurt, but she could move. Now, she needed to figure out where she was and how to get out. The hangar was massive, filled with crates and covered equipment. She moved through the shadows, orienting herself by the layout. The air had a specific quality, dry and cool, that told her she was still somewhere near the coast. Probably still at Miramar, in one of the decommissioned sections that Hale's people had access to. She found a window high up on the far wall and climbed a stack of crates to reach it. Through the glass, she could see the airstrip, the control tower, and in the distance, the newer hangars where active operations ran 24 hours a day. She was exactly where she'd hoped to be. Hale thought he'd trapped her, but he'd actually put her in the one place she knew better than anywhere else. This was where she'd trained, where she'd logged hundreds of hours in simulators before ever touching a real helicopter. She knew every building, every access point, every security blind spot. She dropped down from the crates and moved toward the far end of the hangar, where an old access corridor connected to the simulator bay. The door was locked, but the lock was ancient, something installed decades ago and never updated. She used the ceramic blade to jimmy it open. The corridor was dark and smelled like dust. She moved quickly, her feet silent on the concrete floor. At the end of the corridor was another door, and beyond that, the simulator bay where she'd found the flash drive days earlier. She pushed through and stopped. Dane Rourke was waiting for her. He stood in the center of the bay, a gun in his hand, his expression somewhere between satisfaction and resignation. Hale said you'd come this way. He knows you better than you think. Amara assessed the situation. Rourke had the gun, but his stance was off. His weight was too far forward, his grip too tight. He was angry, and angry people made mistakes. You should have stayed down, Rourke said. Hale gave you an out, a chance to make this easy. Easy for who? Amara asked. For everyone. Rourke's voice rose slightly. You think you're the hero here? You're not. You're just someone who couldn't follow orders, and now people are suffering because of it. People died because of the orders I refused, Amara said quietly. Children. Civilians. Innocent people. Collateral damage, Rourke spat. It happens in war. You don't get to decide what's justified and what's not. Yes, I do, Amara said. That's exactly what I get to decide. That's what being human means. Rourke's hand shook slightly. Hale told me to bring you back alive. But he also said if you resisted, I could handle it however I needed to. Then handle it, Amara said. Rourke raised the gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. But in that moment, something shifted in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or exhaustion. The weight of carrying grudges for too long. I saved civilians in Al-Qura, Amara said, her voice steady. I stopped a weapons shipment that would have killed hundreds. You were part of that shipment, Rourke. You were profiting from death. And when I shut it down, you decided to hate me for it instead of questioning what you were doing. Rourke's jaw clenched. You don't know what you cost me. I know exactly what I cost you, Amara said. Blood money. And I'd do it again. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Rourke lowered the gun slightly and fired into the air. The shot echoed through the bay, and he dropped the weapon on the ground. Go, he said hoarsely. Get out of here. Amara didn't hesitate. She ran past him, heading for the exit on the far side of the bay. Behind her, she heard Rourke sink to his knees, the sound of a man finally letting go of something that had been destroying him. She burst out into the night air and immediately pulled out her phone. It had been taken when she was captured, but she'd found it in a storage locker in the hangar, along with her other gear. She dialed Cole's number, praying he could answer. He picked up on the second ring. Amara, where are you? She asked. We're out. Ethan pulled some strings, got us released on a technicality. They're still trying to figure out what charges will stick, but we're free for now. He paused. Where are you? Miramar. Hale had me, but I got out. He's still here somewhere, and he's planning something. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. I need to get to the old control tower. If I can access the broadcast system one more time, I can send out the raw footage. The unedited confession from Kensington. Make it impossible for them to bury. That's insane, Cole said. The base is on high alert. You'll never make it. I have to try, Amara said. This is the only way to make sure it sticks. To make sure May and Nyla are safe for good. Then I'm coming with you, Cole said. Ethan too. Give us 20 minutes. You don't have to do this, Amara said. Yeah, Ido, Cole replied. You saved my life in Hellman. Let me return the favor. Amara felt something loosen in her chest. 20 minutes. South entrance to the old tower. And Cole? Thank you. She hung up and started moving. The control tower loomed against the night sky, a relic from an earlier era of aviation. It had been decommissioned years ago, but the equipment was still there, mothballed but functional. She just needed to get inside and access the transmitter. And then she needed to survive long enough to finish what she'd started. The old control tower smelled like rust and forgotten ambitions. Amara climbed the stairs 2 at a time, her boots echoing in the empty stairwell. The building was 7 stories tall, and the broadcast equipment was at the top, in the room where controllers used to guide planes to safe landings. She reached the top floor and pushed through the door. The control room was exactly as she remembered it, frozen in time. Dusty consoles, dead monitors, and in the corner, the broadcast array that could still push signals to the military satellite network if someone knew how to activate it. Amara knew how. She moved to the main console and started flipping switches, bringing the system online. Lights flickered to life, and the monitors hummed as they powered up. She pulled out the flash drive, the one she'd found in the simulator, and plugged it into the system. The files loaded. Unedited footage from Al-Qura. Audio of Kensington giving the strike order. Amara's voice refusing. The hospital exploding. Everything that proved her innocence and exposed the conspiracy. She set the broadcast parameters to maximum distribution. Every military installation, every command center, every vessel at sea. This time, there would be no controlling the narrative. Her finger hovered over the transmit button. The door burst open. Hale stepped through, flanked by 2 private security contractors. His expression was cold fury. You really think this changes anything? He asked. You broadcast that footage, and they'll just call it propaganda. Deepfake. Enemy disinformation. Maybe, Amara said, but they'll have to explain why it matches the classified flight logs. Why the audio signature verifies. Why every detail lines up with operational records. It won't matter, Hale said. He nodded to the contractors, and they raised their weapons. You'll be dead, and dead people can't testify. That's where you're wrong, said a voice from the stairwell. Cole stepped through the door, his own weapon drawn. Behind him was Ethan, and behind Ethan was a woman Amara didn't recognize. She was in her 40s, black, wearing a press badge that identified her as Carla Wu from an independent investigative outlet. Ms. Wu has been recording everything since we entered the building, Cole said, and it's streaming live to 3 different servers. You shoot anyone, and the world sees it in real time. Hale's face went pale. That's illegal. Unauthorized recording on a military installation is exactly what we needed, Carla said, holding up her phone. I've got footage of you threatening a decorated pilot, admitting to falsifying evidence, confessing to conspiracy. She smiled, and 10,000 people are watching right now. Hale looked at his contractors. Shoot them. Neither man moved. We're not killing civilians on camera, one of them said flatly. We're contractors, not murderers. Hale lunged toward the console, trying to pull the flash drive free. Amara intercepted him, and they crashed to the floor. He was stronger than he looked, driven by desperation, but Amara had spent 8 years preparing for this moment. She drove her knee into his solar plexus, grabbed his arm, and twisted it into the same joint lock she'd used on Cole at Dock 27. Hale screamed, and she held him there, her face inches from his. Still think I'm just an experiment? She asked. Cole helped her zip-tie Hale's wrists and pull him to his feet. In the distance, sirens were approaching. Real military police this time, not Hale's paid help. Amara returned to the console and pressed the transmit button. Red lights flashed across the system. The broadcast went live, streaming to every military installation on the planet. The unedited footage played, Amara's voice clear and unwavering as she refused the unlawful order. Kensington's override, the explosion, the aftermath, the truth, finally completely visible. Amara watched the screens, seeing the signal propagate across networks. In bases from Germany to Japan, from ships in the Pacific to command centers in Virginia, personnel were watching the same footage, seeing the same evidence. It's done, she said quietly. Cole put a hand on her shoulder. You did it. The military police arrived minutes later. They took Hale into custody, this time with charges that couldn't be dismissed or delayed. Conspiracy, falsification of military records, obstruction of justice, and accessory to war crimes. Carla Wu got it all on camera. The next few days were a blur. Amara gave depositions, answered questions, and watched as the story exploded across every news outlet in the country. Ouroboros was dismantled piece by piece. Vice Admiral Kensington was arrested at his home in Virginia. Rourke, who'd turned himself in after letting Amara escape, received immunity in exchange for testimony. And slowly, painfully, the truth became undeniable. 2 weeks after the broadcast, Amara received a package at May's house. Inside was a formal letter from the Department of Defense. Her status had been changed from Kia to active reserve. Her record had been cleared, and attached to the letter was a commendation for extraordinary courage and adherence to the rules of engagement. She read it twice, then set it aside. The vindication felt hollow. The children who died in Al-Qara were still dead. The years she'd spent hiding were still gone. But Nyla was safe. May was free, and the system, however slowly, was being held accountable. That would have to be enough. 3 months later, Dock 27 reopened. Rita had fought through the legal mess and gotten her bar back, along with a formal apology and compensation for the damages. The place looked almost exactly as it had before, weathered and welcoming, with the same neon sign flickering between blue and green. Amara walked in on a Friday evening, dressed in jeans and a simple jacket. The bar was crowded with locals, fishermen celebrating the end of a good week, and in the corner, Cole and Ethan were playing darts with terrible accuracy. Rita saw her and smiled. Look what the cat dragged in. Hey, Rita, Amara said. Zinger ale. Coming right up. Rita poured the drink and slid it across the bar. You hear about Milo? What about him? Got himself a job with a cybersecurity firm, consulting on ethical data practices or something. Making good money, from what I heard. Rita wiped the counter. He called me last week. Said he couldn't have done any of it without you. Amara took a sip of her drink. He did the hard part. I just gave him a reason to use it. Cole walked over, abandoning the dart game. We were wondering if you'd show up. Figured I owed you a drink, Amara said. For Hellman. And for everything after. You don't owe me anything, Cole said. He held up his beer. But I'll take the drink anyway. They clinked glasses, and for a moment, Dock 27 felt like what it had always been meant to be, a place where people could come together, share stories, and remind themselves that they weren't alone. The television above the bar was tuned to a news station. A reporter was discussing the fallout from the Ouroboros scandal, noting that congressional hearings were ongoing and that several high-ranking officials had resigned or been forced out. Luis, still working behind the bar, glanced at the screen and then at Amara. They're calling you captain again. Saw it in the paper this morning. Amara shrugged. They can call me whatever they want. What do you want them to call you? Luis asked. She thought about it for a moment, then smiled faintly. Amara. Just Amara. In the back corner of the bar, a young man in his early 20s sat watching the television with wide eyes. He just finished boot camp and was home on leave. He turned to his friend and said, That's her. That's Viper 1. His friend looked skeptical. The pilot from the news? No way. I'm telling you, that's her. Luis overheard and chuckled. You want some advice, kid? Don't mess with the quiet ones. They've already seen war. The young man nodded slowly, still staring. Then he turned back to his beer, properly awed. Amara didn't hear the conversation. She was talking to Cole about what came next, about rebuilding, about finding something like normal again. May was coming by later with Nyla, and they were planning to have dinner together, just the four of them. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she first walked into Dock 27 all those weeks ago, but it was an ending she could live with. Outside, the sun was setting over the harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The storm had passed, the water was calm, and somewhere in the distance, a boat's horn sounded, calling everyone home. Amara finished her ginger ale and set the glass down gently. She looked around the bar, at the people laughing and talking, at Rito wiping down tables, at Cole arguing with Ethan about proper dart technique. This was what she'd fought for. Not glory, not vindication, not even justice. Just the simple right to exist without fear. To walk into a bar, order a drink, and be seen as a person rather than a ghost. She'd been Viper 1. She'd been Kia. She'd been hunted and erased and forced to live in the shadows. But now, finally, she was just Amara Blake. And that was more than enough. The television flickered, showing one final segment about the Ouroboros case. The anchor mentioned that a full declassification of the Alcara incident was underway, and that a memorial was being planned for the victims. Amara watched for a moment, then turned away. Some things couldn't be fixed with broadcasts and trials. Some wounds stayed open forever. But you could still move forward. You could still choose to live. And that's exactly what she planned to do. May arrived with Nyla, and the girl's face lit up when she saw Amara. And Amara, did you see the article? They're putting your story in a book. I heard, Amara said, pulling Nyla into a hug. But let's not believe everything we read, okay? Why not? Nyla asked. It's all true. Most of it, Amara admitted. But the best stories aren't about the big moments. They're about the quiet ones. The times we choose to keep going even when it's hard. Nyla thought about that, then nodded seriously. Like right now. Exactly like right now, Amara said. They sat down at a table, ordered food, and talked about normal things. School, work, plans for the weekend. May told a story about one of her VFW friends getting into an argument about the best way to cook fish. Cole complained about paperwork. Ethan mentioned that he was thinking about teaching tactics at a community college. Life, in all its ordinary complexity, continued. And as the evening wore on and the bar filled with the comfortable noise of people being people, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Peace. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. And for a pilot who'd spent so long flying through storms, real peace was the only kind that mattered. The neon sign outside flickered one last time, settling on blue, and Dock 27 glowed like a beacon in the gathering dark. A place where stories ended and began. A place where ghosts could finally rest. A place where the name Viper One would be remembered not for the mockery or the fear, but for the courage to refuse an unlawful order and the determination to make sure the truth survived. And in the end, that was the only legacy worth having. When the powerful try to bury the truth, how far would you go to make sure it survives? If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage, justice, and the people who refuse to stay silent.